Thank you, Nick. I think all minds are officially blown. So when Nick is in person, he will be crawling, jumping, lying down, dancing, swinging from the beams. So you can imagine he now constricted in front of his computer. You must be a little frustrated, but just to give you a sense what it would be like if he came here. So let's talk. Let's have this conversation. And how do we decolonize our minds today, in this moment, right here? So let's hear from everyone. Tell us about your officially blown minds. Share some words.
When talking about reclaiming sovereignty, I suddenly remembered during the early pandemic last year, and suddenly everyone was like sharing, not everyone, but like we can see like the sudden trend of people hanging extra food on their fences, and then putting up signs like, please take this extra batik, please take this extra papaya, we have them extra in our garden. And then we can see it like in Penampang, in Putatan. And then that made me connect lah with this presentation today. Like it's automatic in the face of survival, you know. Yeah, baby agrees.
Yeah, baby agrees. I like it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, Noor, that's so important because, like you said, it's automatic. You know, we take it for granted. We don't even, uh, we don't give it the acknowledgement and the value that it deserves, because this is the foundation of something that could change the whole society. But for us, it's just, oh, that's just something I did, you know? But really, it's something that we can build on. And because people have memories, even though people think, well, I don't speak my language anymore, I don't practice my culture anymore, I don't live in a village anymore, so basically it's all finished and I'm lost. No, you don't realize, but you have so many things that you learned. You learned from your ancestors, through your mother and your father, through the people around you. And many of these knowledges are the knowledges that allow us to do those things to survive. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to survive. We don't. So we were taught one way or another things that allow us to survive, and not just to survive, to thrive, to fulfill our needs, in not just in a way that finishes our hunger for things, but also fulfills us in a much deeper way. So those kinds of exchanges where you take something that the abundance of nature, because you respected that fruit tree, that fruit tree gave you back so much abundance, and you couldn't eat it all yourself. You share it with your neighbors, and that to me, that's the foundation that's already there, that we can really build the kind of change that Forever Sabah is looking for and is working for. So a lot of times we do our work and we say, oh, it's going to be so hard, and like, where do we start? Well, those are the places we can start. And in the pandemic, a lot of things have happened, and a lot of people have changed the ways they live, to in such a way that the things that they do now are more life-seeking rather than death-seeking. A lot of people have moved away from a lot of addictive behaviors that they used to have. And a lot of people are spending more time connecting with their families, connecting with the people around them, connecting with their environments, working in gardens. So there are so many things that are happening also. And it just shows that even with all of this death around us, the pandemic, as a part of the system that seeks death, we can create life. We can survive, and not survive, but thrive in the midst of all of that.
Hi, Nick. I'm Vivian.
Hi.
So honestly, I feel really blessed and thankful for your sharing last night and also today. It really opened up my eyes because just about 2 years ago, I was studying in university and they didn't taught me things like this. So what I can say is time is not waiting for us. Um, we keep on moving forward without stopping every day. So I think it's very important for us to be humble, stop and continue to be learning instead of just thinking about ourselves. Um, the world doesn't revolve around us, and we have to see the bigger picture, and we shouldn't throw judgments too early. Yeah, that's what I think. I'm really thankful for this eye-opening experience and your sharing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vivian. And I have to apologize for the universities, because the universities um, are could do so much to support the kind of work that you're doing. But instead, the universities, most of the universities are actually supporting the work of companies to steal more land and steal more labor. And I haven't even begun to talk about intellectual property and how they're taking ideas and turning them into commodities, and using um, let's see, I think it's yes. Oh, in Colombia, when I used to live in Colombia, if we had no other thing, when we're if we were at a particular time when we couldn't afford to buy anything else, we would always buy these cakes of sugar, like the old sugar used to be like a brown cake, and we used to buy that. It's called panela in Spanish, and we would take that and lemongrass and make tea, and that's what we would have all day. And and now there's a company that wants to patent panela, which people can't understand. I mean, this is something that everybody always had, and now a company is going to patent it, package it, and then make you buy it and keep you from producing it unless you get permission from that company. So yes, unfortunately, our universities are becoming more and more like businesses, and more like linear economic extractive enterprises. And there are some of us in the university who are trying to do something different, but I think that in fact, I would love my students to be able to go to work with you and see what you are doing. And I'm sure they'd learn much more from you, Vivian, than they would learn from me and in the university. Because what you are doing, like you said, is something is working with people in such a way that you're creating what we were talking about before, these communities of co-learners. Everybody's a learner, everybody's a teacher. and with that that humbleness that you were talking about. I think that many of my students, many of whom are teachers, could learn so much from that experience. So maybe someday I can bring some of my students to Sabah. Anyway, that's a dream. And when they come, please leave some space in your workday to bring them along and share some of the wonderful things you're doing with them.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Nick. Hi, Nick. Hello. My name's Jan.
Hey.
Good evening. Thanks for sharing. I'm part of the tech team, so I'm sitting all the way back here.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for such a powerful PowerPoint presentation. And I guess one of the most insightful things I've learned in today's and yesterday's talk was before listening to your PowerPoint, I thought that greed was something that is inherent in all of us, that it's some kind of hunger that you have to try your best to keep in check. But I guess what was the most profound is that when you're showing us the comparison between Vanuatu and the US, is that you can really curb these urges of greed and fear by providing fulfillment, cooperation, communication, and that trust. So I just thought that was so powerful, because every day I'm thinking, like, how can we, spread that kind of, how do you say, insight on how to get people away from that greed and that kind of need, and like how to avoid people thinking that everything's like a zero-sum game, that if someone has more, I have less. So I just thought that when you were showing us a comparison, when these other cultures have trust, community, people to look out for, and a whole culture built around sharing, I just thought that, wow, we can achieve this. We can achieve a society without greed, without tension, without mistrust, and without conflict. So yeah, just thank you so much for just showing me that. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Kam. And Kam, this is what you said is so important. This is a concept that I didn't have time to talk much about, but the idea of zero-sum game. And I think you could see that in the criminal justice system, in the linear society, where you have a winner and a loser. You also see it in a linear economy where one person gets richer and richer and richer and everybody else loses. But why can't everybody win? And when you go to school and when you listen to the media, and even some religions preach that that people are inherently greedy, and that's just so-called human nature. So in other words, if you accept that, you're accepting their vision of what's normal, their vision of what's good, their vision of what's true as your vision. That's how they colonize your mind. And the process of decolonization, the process of undoing the domestication, is about that. It's about realizing that for most of human history, in most of human cultures, it wasn't that way, and it doesn't need to be that way. So in other words, this system that seems so big now, that seems so monstrous, that seems so powerful now, is actually, first of all, something very recent in human history. Number two, does not represent what most human cultures ever did. But number three is based on lies, is based on lies about what's true, lies about what's good, lies about what's normal. In other words, it has a very weak foundation, a very weak foundation. So when we speak truth to that lie, the lie has no power over us. So it may seem like the system is sometimes like, why am I even trying to fight against this system? Or why am I even trying to challenge this system? It seems so big, it's everywhere. It's in people's minds have been saturated with it. It seems so strong, but actually it's actually very weak. and it doesn't represent what most of our ancestors had for most of human history. So it's more like a blip, a blip that went wrong somehow that we need to correct. So yeah, it's about changing our understanding of what's normal, changing our understanding of what human nature is, changing our understanding of what's true. And that's something you can do right now. You can do it right now. Okay, Ryan.
Hello, hi.
Hello, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm okay. Yes, no, I'm. This is working with you is for me something that gives me fulfillment. So I'm in a very fulfilled place right now.
Okay. Yeah. Based on your lecture, I feel like I can relate it with indigenous practices in Borneo. Like for example, like what you say, from your experience with Kula system, where here in Sarawak, in Iban practices, we have this system Baduro, um, which mean one labor, one household will exchange labor with another household. So which mean the labor is very cheap. I'm not sure if in Sabah, I heard about tabang practices before, where the indigenous people they exchange labor. So I can feel the relation between
Yes.
these practices, and I think it's very good because it will be sustainable because low cost and the technology used also is not very destructive because they usually use manual labor. They are using instead of big machines, they just use hands and their legs to maneuvering and to do many things, hard labor lah. Yeah, that's how I feel. It has very close connection with indigenous people in here.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay, Ryan. That is. Those are excellent examples, and you know, you may not know when you're going to need it. It's you know, it's like um, the all of these circular economies, all of these circular politics, all of these relationships, these networks, they're like our banks and our pharmacies and our hospitals and our schools. In other words, and our insurance. So you know, you don't know. Maybe there's a typhoon, and you lose your house, but you always know that because you at one point helped in to do a big job for somebody in your community, that the people of your community will come back and do a job that you need to do that you may not be able to do yourself. Your ancestors had their own pharmacy you and give you side effects, and also a pharmacy where you didn't need to use money. Your ancestors had the bank. In other words, they knew it would organize itself to make sure that whatever you needed in terms of labor was there, because they knew that if they had an accident or an emergency, you would go and help them as well. So these labor exchanges that you were talking about, yes. So it's almost as if um, uh, when the British came, uh, they brought institutions that actually people already had. And the ones that the people already had were worked better for the community. Because first of all, they didn't involve money, so that people didn't have to go and do money work or slave work for somebody else to get the money to pay for the medicine or to pay for whatever they needed. But also, as people were working together, as people were exchanging labor, it also cemented relationships. So in other words, it's more than just a labor exchange. It's an exchange of love. It's an exchange of goodwill. It's an exchange on so many different levels. And a lot of places, what happens is when you get those labor exchanges, the people who are receiving the labor have to feed the people who do the work. So it's also an exchange in terms of food. So I know that in Vanuatu, when people do these labor exchanges, say if I need to build a house, then the people of the village will come and build a house for me, but my job is to feed them. And so there's an exchange there while they are working. So those are the kinds of things. And so it builds so much more than just uh, a labor exchange. It means so much more. So yeah, so those are the kind of things that are the foundation upon which Forever Sabah and all the other organizations that are working in Northern Borneo can really build on. You know, those are really solid foundations. And if people are still doing it, that is a really, really, really solid and uh, solid and potentially potentially revolutionary kind of foundation that you can build something on. And it has so much, there's so much energy there, it has so much potential. So to me, when I see things like that happening in villages or places where it could be an indigenous place or it could be in a city where people are doing these types of exchanges, to me, that number one makes me remember that we all have this capacity and we all have this memory of what our ancestors did. So it's the memory is not dead, the memory is still there. But number two, it gives me hope for the future, because you can see that all of these things that we learn in school, that people are just selfish, that people are just greedy. That's not true. That actually there's a lot of things in the things that people do, the way people think and the way people speak in their lives today, that give us what we need to create a different future.
I thank you, Nick. That was awesome. Yeah, you're sharing this morning from last night, and especially in the end, how we conclude that we have to start now. Sometimes, because I work with children also among indigenous communities, and I also work with youths, and I do get this question. They said, oh, they're not, they have to go, they have to be in town, they have to work, so we cannot practice the indigenous values. But the answers and the sharing just now, that actually wherever you are, that you can practice it. It's now, it begins with the mind, and doing it yourself and sharing it with others, and and actually in the community sometimes it's much more easier. But of course within the community there is also those leaders who might if we try to do things together, there are those leaders that who are what we call colonized or domesticated. That's the work that we do when we do community organizing, that we also face a lot of challenges, but now we understand why it is. So it gives me that light and understanding deeper on how we can continue the work, especially in community organizing, both in the rural area and also in the urban area, and how we can bring back these values, because that will bring us that, give us that sovereignty. And the other thing is, because we said like as an organization, we work for the indigenous rights. But now I think I begin to understand this. It has to go beyond the rights. It has to go beyond that. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anne. And you know that we weren't able to talk a lot about rights and power, but this is something that if we had more time we could. But I just want to share a little bit of a story, a very short story. So in Papua New Guinea, pigs are very important. So when people do exchanges, they often involve pigs. So when people exchange pigs, there are so many levels of meaning. It's not just about pigs. It's also, there's a spiritual side. There's a side that connects families. There's so many levels. But anyway, what they say is that my indigenous sovereignty is like the leg of a pig. Okay, so the leg of the pig has meat and a bone. Okay, that sovereignty that I have over land, for example, is like holding the leg of the pig in my hand. But there are people in the government that want me to register my land. And they tell me that if I register my land, they'll give me a piece of paper, a title that will make me a landowner. Okay, and that sort of corruption, that sort of patronage makes one person feel better than somebody else and makes one person feel like they have control. But actually, when you register your land under the government system, the government takes sovereignty over your land, and all you have is that piece of paper, the title, that only gives you the right to the land. So what they say in Papua New Guinea is, if I keep my land under my indigenous laws, I'm holding the leg of the pig with the meat and the bone. But if I register my land, then I'm giving the leg of the pig to the government. And then the government takes the meat and gives it to the company and then gives me back the bone. And that's my right. So in other words, if you have sovereignty, if you have power, you have all the rights. And nobody can take those rights away from you. But if you only have rights and you don't have power, the power is in the parliament or the power is somewhere else. And then those rights can be given to you today and they can be taken away from you tomorrow. That's the difference between power and rights. And I'm not saying it's not important to struggle for rights. Yes, rights are important. The struggles for rights are important. We have to fight for our rights, but we have to realize, just like you said, that there's something more than rights. That our struggle for rights should not end with something more than rights. That we should keep struggling until we achieve sovereignty. In other words, rights are a step along the way to something bigger. And when we achieve sovereignty, we have all the rights and nobody can ever take any of those rights away from us.
And anyone else? Any voices online? Casey? Neville, okay.
Thank you so much, Nick, for this beautiful presentation. I cannot help but keep wondering now, how do we approach this, especially when working with communities? Before this, I realized that we've encouraged communities to reclaim those rights based on the foundation, based on colonial foundations, like colonial laws, colonial ways of doing things, and to advocate for the rights or for the community to be able to really claim the power, they have to use those instruments instead. So I've been talking to community about, do you know what is your rights according to our enactments or ordinance? And then, I just help but wonder now, should we just ignore those things and just let the communities just focus on their landscape? But that can be dangerous too. You know what I mean? Because if communities are not aware of that, then they'll use it just in a blink of an eye. That's why a lot of communities have to educate themselves about the law.
Yeah.
To conform.
So, go ahead. Yeah. So really, really important point. And this connects with several different things that that were mentioned. Now, last night, Ilan mentioned something about the actually, let's see, I guess it was morning for you and night for me. So in Ilan's session, she mentioned about the understandings of indigenous peoples as people who wear feathers or something like that. Okay, so, and then we're talking about now indigenous peoples as actually not people who are closed off, not people who were not open to other ways of doing things, other sciences, other technologies, etc. So we know, for example, that indigenous peoples shared so much. They shared different types of food crops, for example, so that one group of indigenous people would adopt food crops from another group. But when they planted those food crops, when they okay, before, okay, so basically that process involved reading and writing life. Okay, so the first step before they accepted the new food crop, okay, say if it was let's see, something from the Americas that came to Sabah, maybe something like potato. Okay, are there people in Sabah who plant potato? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, but before you do that, before you started planting potatoes, they came from somewhere else. So the first step, you read that. You read those potatoes. Are those potatoes something that is going to bring life to your community, or are those potatoes something that's going to damage your community? And you realize that no, those potatoes are something good, we will take them. But when you take them, you write your life. In other words, you plant those potatoes the way people in Sabah plant things, not the way people in South America plant things, even though the potatoes came from South America. So in other words, when we're talking about things from the outside, even colonial things, okay, when we're talking about sovereignty, it doesn't mean that you immediately reject them, anything from the outside. No, it means when something comes from the outside, you read it. Is this something that's going to help me or hurt me? Is this going to give life to my community or damage my community? Is this going to give me life or damage my life? Okay. If it's some kind of a sovereign relationship with this thing, in other words, you don't allow this thing to control you, you control this thing. That's sovereignty. So in other words, sovereignty doesn't mean that you close everything out from the outside. Nothing. I'm not going to allow anything in. No. Sovereignty means is if you see something new, you read it. find out what's behind it. Is it something that's going to help you in your community or harm you in your community? If it's something that can help you, then you take it in, you take it into your community, but you make sure that this thing works in your interest and not you working in its interest. It's about control. And this is also about migration. So we said over and over again, I said over and over again the last two sessions, that in many indigenous communities, people from the outside come in. But when people from the outside come in, they are welcome. They're welcome because people have security. If I have complete land and food and housing security, I can welcome somebody from the outside. Maybe they had a typhoon in their place and they had to run away. And when they come to my place, and I welcome them. And I tell the young people to build them a house. And I say, okay, there's some land that we don't use, make your garden there. But every year at a certain time, they take some food from that garden and they bring it to me to show that they understand who traditionally is the person who looks after that land, and to make sure that when they come to my place or our place, they follow our laws. Okay, so this is something interesting too, because when things come from the outside, they should follow your laws. Okay, so if you go to Britain, if you go to Australia, if you go to Indonesia, you have to follow their laws. If you want to make a business in Britain, if you want to make a business in the US, you have to follow the laws of Britain, or you have to follow the laws of the US, right? But it's funny, when they come to Sabah, which laws do they follow? In other words, a lot of times they'll say, well, we can't make a business on your land until you register it. But that registration is not your customary law. So here they are coming to your place and making you register your land under their laws. So that shows that these people have not come to Sabah with your interests in mind. They have come to steal your land, and they're going to use their own laws to steal your land. So in other words, if anybody comes to Sabah and tells you, we're not going to, or some a company from another country, or a businessman from another country comes to your place and says, well, I want to do this project, but you have to register your land first, that's the sign that that person is not serious. That person has come to steal. That person has not come to do anything else but steal. If they were really serious, they would say, here, I have this project I can do. There's this business we can do. But since I am in your place, I am in your country, I have to follow your laws.
Hi, Nick. Thank you very much for your session. The whole time I'm listening to you, I feel my body shakes. I don't know why. Maybe we have interacted well through the mind, but spiritually and also body, I can feel. There's a lot of affirmation that I receive in the work that we are doing, and also the thoughts that I have. But also there's a lot of challenging things that's coming forth. And towards the end, I'm also happy and enlightened because you give, not just the macro things, but also the micro steps that you say you can start from yourself. And I feel that is what I have been keeping. in terms of the heritage and the wisdoms from my ancestors and the surroundings that I have, the community. But also within now that we are working with so many people, and just now my colleague Neville said, we are working in actually almost like persuading people to look into the what we call the laws and enactment, how they can participate in well, conserving or protecting the area, but as well as agreeing to the terms. So it is very challenging, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, challenging things. And if I reflect even closer to myself within the family, in our small family, which now my son will consume a lot of those food. He prefers to eat more of the packed food rather than enjoying, for instance, like what we take sweet potato or cassava, which for us that grew up as a farmer and then educated, there's a huge gap, and I feel the challenge on how to bring this secular, the respect to nature, elders, and the wisdom of the ancestors within the close family of myself, and then bring the idea that we have talked about today to the immediate family that we have. It's really challenging, you know, to have this kind of a mountaintop session. I mean, this is planned, and then we sit down and listen, because maybe we have a structure, an institution that we already, what do you call, assign, I mean, agree to and believe. But then there's this huge challenge. We also belong to the family that's so diverse, and also the belief or the religion around us that is already in this structure. But I am glad, still I am glad, because the session also opened the mind, yeah, open the mind that these are the things that is linear and secular, and telling how to read, how to analyze, how to reflect deeper, and then how to start writing. That means how to start doing. Have this kind of a mountaintop session. I mean, this is planned, and then we sit down and listen, because maybe we have a structure, an institution that we already, what do you call, assign, I mean, agree to and believe. But then there's this huge challenge. We also belong to the family that's so diverse, and also the belief or the religion around us that is already in this structure. But I am glad, still I am glad, because the session also opened the mind, yeah, open the mind that these are the things that is linear and secular, and telling how to read, how to analyze, how to reflect deeper, and then how to start writing. That means how to start doing. So it is good. That's why I'm like this. Maybe I try to hold also. I want to cry, also have. But because we are in a group of people, and there's this online connection, there's also probably that's why I'm holding. So thank you very much, and I'm so thankful. Maybe, not maybe, definitely in future we can be together in this land. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Winnie. Yes, this is a very challenging thing, the food. It's one of the things that you can start with, but it's also very challenging because a lot of the foods that young people are eating are addictive foods. because salt and sugar and fat and all of those flavorings are very addictive. And so those foods are designed to make young people addicted to them so they won't eat anything else. So this is a very big challenge. One interesting example from Vanuatu, one of the provinces of Vanuatu has said no more fast food. So in other words, the whole province, there's no fast food allowed in the province. So the government of the province has decided that they will not do fast food anymore. Also, I don't know if how hooked or how connected Forever Sabah is with the slow food movement. Do you connect with them?
Thank you. Sorry, we lost our speech for a moment. Yes, we are in a slow dance towards the slow food movement. But yes,
Yeah.
it's definitely in our field of consciousness.
Yeah, okay, good. Because there's an international movement now to get away from fast food, and there are lots of people doing lots of interesting things. So we need, it's not an easy thing, but there are people all around the world who have the same ideas as you and are trying all kinds of creative ways to do it. So there are people in the slow food movement who can share their stories about how they deal with the problem of their children being addicted to these fast foods. And so maybe there's something clever somebody's doing somewhere, or creative somebody's doing somewhere. You can connect with them and share with them what they're doing with their children. Maybe they can also share what they're doing with or the things that they've done that are successful. They can share their successes and their failures with their children with you, so you give it can give you some new ideas about different things you can try, but also to give you a sense that you're not alone. There are lots of people facing the same thing as you're facing, and there are ways to share the knowledge, what you're learning from that experience with them. So that's those are good people to hook up with when you're struggling with something like your children not wanting to eat the foods that give them life, but they're eating foods that are actually damaging them, and actually death-seeking foods instead of life-seeking foods.
Thank you, Nick. So there's a last person, Casey, who wants to say something, and then I think we'll wrap up. Casey is representing from Malaya.
Dr. Nicholas, I think to capitalize on your 12 hours away experience, your vast experience working all over the world, right? So I think I'm more keen on moving forward, right? So you have spoken about linearity, circularity, and people coming into our place, dictating what to do and all that. So if you have one key advice for all of us, because we are always grappling with, funders want us to do it this way, the government agency want us to do it this way. Funder says we just want to work with apes, we don't want to work with any other animal. So we are being confronted with many people who come in and say, this is how we want it to be done, right? And then my colleague Yana also said she has trouble doing the reporting because the reporting is always linear. So in very practical real life issues as the context, what is your single advice you can give us on, is there a way, do you have any experience how that it works? How do we slowly probably convince our funders, our partners and all that, to go towards the circular way? One key blow. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, I guess for me, it's always been about um, taking my cues from the community. So in other words, you have the demands of the funders, you have the demands of different agencies involved. But actually, if if you if you actually go to a community and actually allow the community to, as much as possible, take control over the situation, to take control over the process of identifying problems, analyzing problems, solving problems, but also determining the direction in which the project goes. Because, okay, just an example from my life. I explained to you what happened to me when I went to Nigeria. And I went with an agenda that was determined by a funding agency to do research, a linguistic research on the Creole language spoken in Nigeria, Nigerian Creole. So it's a language that's a lot like Jamaican, for example. It's got English words, but a lot of African structures. In any case, that's what I was supposed to do when I went to Nigeria. That's what they gave me money to do. But when I got there, I realized that, number one, if I did my research in the traditional way, it would be very colonizing. In other words, here I come to steal something from Nigeria, some knowledge, to go and get my PhD or do something that would get recognition in a university somewhere else. And I didn't believe in that. So basically what I said when I went there is that, wait, don't worry about my agenda. It's true that I have made an application and that they gave me money to do this work, to study the Creole spoken in Nigeria. But I think the best way to accomplish to make the most of my being here in terms of what I can share with the people in Nigeria and what the people in Nigeria can share with me is to connect with the community around a real problem. So basically, I told the professor, she was sitting in the room, there was Mr. Etete sitting in the corner, and she said, "What's your agenda?" And I said to her, "No, don't worry about my agenda. Don't worry about what the funding agency had to do. Where is a meaningful way in which I can connect with the community right here?" And so she introduced me to Mr. Etete. And Mr. Etete community had decided they wanted somebody to come, a linguist, to actually help them to solve a practical problem. They wanted somebody to write their language, which had never been written before, to make a grammar of their language so they could teach their children reading and writing in their language before they learn to read and write in English. Okay, so I explained that yesterday. But what I didn't explain yesterday was I had to learn Mr. Etete's language. I went to the village, I lived there, and I learned the language in order to write a grammar. But while I was learning the language, as I said, this is an indigenous community and they spoke many languages. So while I was learning their language, I was also learning Nigerian Creole. So in other words, I was accomplishing both at the same time. So for me, the best way to handle those kinds of situations is to take my cue from the community. Try to connect with a community around a real issue that they have. And in the end, what I found is I didn't just learn the language of the community, their indigenous language, but I also learned the language I was supposed to be learning for my funding agency. And then I was able to write a grammar of the Creole language as well. But through the perspective of an African language, which means that my work on that language was different from the work that other people in the US or Europe were doing, because they were still seeing things through European eyes, and they were trying to describe the language and write about the language through a European understanding of what language is and the way language works. But because I had learned the language of the community, I gained an African perspective on the way language works. And that meant so what I had promised the funding agency I would do, I did a much better job doing that by not following the agenda that they told me that I had to follow. So in other words, now I know every situation is different. You know, I'm not saying that everybody is going to be able to do it just like that. But that's when I went to Papua New Guinea, it was the same way. I went to Papua New Guinea, I was supposed to do research. But again, they asked me what my agenda was. I told them, no, what do you want me to do? And they sent me to villages to work on these types of programs again. But in that process, I achieved not only what the community wanted, but also I achieved what the funding agency wanted, and I achieved it better than others were achieving, even for the funding agency, because I was doing it from a bottom-up approach. So I guess if there's one main thing I could advise is basically connect at that community level and then build from below. Build from below. And then what you'll find is usually the results are so good from that process, so much better than what other people are trying to do top down, that in the end, you'll not only meet your community's needs, but you will also, if your funding agency has any kind of open mind about it, they will see that actually you're accomplishing what you set out to do, what you promised you would do under the contract or under the project proposal, but in a much better way than if you'd approached it in a top-down way, or put what the funding agency wanted first. I don't know if that helped.
Thank you, Nick. I think what Nick has described is what I've been calling vertical literacy. So you understand the top down, and you understand and build your faculty and your capacity to understand the bottom up. Because this is our job, right? We're basically communicators, and we want to be effective, and we want to be change makers. So it's our job to have the literacy. So it doesn't have to be either or.
Yes.
We don't want to perpetuate the othering or the demonizing. But it is our job as change makers to understand the constructs and the language within those constructs. So it's almost 10:30, and Nick has been sitting in front of the linear box for 3 hours. I think we have to let him go to sleep. This is not the end, it's the beginning. Now you guys know that someone called Nick Faraclas exists on the planet, and it's the beginning of our relationship, Sabah's relationship with him, and his with ours. And I'm pretty sure he'll land at some point on the earth and in the waters here. So, in the spirit of sharing from our baskets, can we all turn on our cameras and share from our baskets with Nick? Show some love. a big hand, etc. Anything that he can go to sleep with. All right. Good night, Nick. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Good night.
Yes. Keep up the good work.